Hi there, Ray here today with another video. In today's video we're going to look at ways you can make your PC run the games you want. Maybe your PC or laptop is struggling. Maybe it's stuttering a lot. Well, in this guide we are going to look at ways to stop that. At least it should help you, even if your PC just runs hot. Trying these things should help you. If you want to do these things, you are not going to overclock anything. You will not need any special program. These tips should work in any game. So in this video I will tell you what you want to do, and then I will tell you how does that affect your game. So without wasting even more of your time, let's start with the video. So we will see the game settings here, and if you are someone that knows how the game settings work, then you probably shouldn't watch the video. We are going to see what we can do in the game settings to make the game run smoother. And we are not going to watch different games gameplay, because I want this to be a video that helps you to play every game you want, and it should work in every game. And the first thing is the resolution, and almost every game has this. And depending on your display it is set. So if you have a display that is 1920 by 1080, and to be honest right now that is the resolution of most displays. So what does 1920 by 1080 mean? Well, that is the number of pixels in a horizontal line and on a vertical line. And by pixels I mean the number of dots in the screen. The dots make the image. So the only thing that you actually need to know about this is the higher the number, the sharper the image. And if you are trying to play a game and for example you don't have a GPU, well, if the game is not that demanding you should be able to play the game at 720p. That means you should get the resolution 1280 by 720, and you will be able to notice the difference. The image is not as sharp, but it is not as bad as people make it. And to be honest, is it better to have a bit of a sharper image, or is it better to have a smooth gameplay? Let's be honest, if the games start to stutter, well, it will make you angry. It is not playable, but you have to choose that. And to do that, go to options or settings. It depends on the game. But usually it is options then graphics, and when you click on the graphics, well, you have resolution there, and you can change it. Just make sure the display is at full screen. The game usually has that, but in case it doesn't, make sure you have that, so that the image is still as big as your screen. Now after we do that, there is something we can do to have less stutters, and that is the refresh rate. Normally it is set at 60 frames per second, but if the game just stutters from time to time, then you should put the refresh rate at 30 frames per second. Unless you are playing a first-person shooter game, there you might need 60 frames per second, but normally even 30 FPS should be good for the game. And now let's move on to the settings of the game where changes help the most, and that is the texture quality, shadows, and things like that. But first let's look at the texture quality. Can you guess what that means? That means how the texture will look like. You can guess that by the name. Probably when you see this you will know what that means. And here this settings is set to high or normal. And if the game isn't running well, you can set it from high to normal. And if it was set at normal, set it at low. The game will not look as good, but it will be a lot more smoother. And right now we want the game to look as smooth as we can. You can find this setting at the graphics as well. To be honest, you can find everything at the graphics, so I will not mention the setting anymore. And then we have shadows. And here we can change how clear we want the shadows to look. But in a lot of games you can turn this off. And without shadows the game will not look as good. But not as good is still better than the game stuttering when you need it to work properly. But if you want the shadow, then set it to low. And if you have the shadow resolution, then set it to low. I mean, now you have shadows. You don't need the shadows to be crystal clear. It will not make a difference in looks, but it will help when it comes to performance. Then we have the level of detail. And this is more or less like the texture quality. But in the texture quality option, it has more to do with texture quality. But when it comes to the detail quality, it has to do more with shapes and things like that. And just like the texture quality, you need to set this option lower than what it is. Then you have anti-aliasing. And here again you want to set this to off. And why you want to do this, or if you wonder what this is, well, this can smooth the edges, so it will make the edges of the game look better. But it can have an effect in the game, so you can turn this off. And in most cases the difference isn't that big. It's not like the game will look that much better with this on. So in my opinion, turn this off. Then we have depth of field, and here you set this to low or off. And what does this do? Well, this makes things that are far from you look blurry. The higher it is, the sharper things will look, but you don't need to see clearly things that are far from you. If things that are near you don't look good, why do you need to see clearly things that are far? Then we have a really important thing. If you can manage, don't turn this off. This is really important for the game's stability. Do you know what it is? It is hair quality. Do you know what this does? This is how your hair will react. Just kidding, turn this to low or off. You don't need this, and sometimes it can help a lot in performance, and even if it helps a little you will not need it. Compared to other things this is not important. And then we have reflections, and again turn this off. With This on the game will look more realistic, but honestly speaking most of the time, and in intense moments you will not notice it a lot, or maybe you will not notice it at all, so you can set it to low or off, or at least that is my opinion. Don't forget you can mix and match some of the setting. You can turn off some of the settings and keep some. It will not make the game as smooth as it could be, but maybe you don't need it that much. So mix and match however you want, but the lower the settings the better frame rate. And now back to the setting, and now we have SSAO, and it stands for Screen Space Ambient Occlusion. And how does that affect your game? Well, this adds soft shadows to the game, makes the game look a bit better in general, but this will cost you some frames. What does that mean? If you have this one on, the game will look more realistic, but if you have this off, it will give you some more frames per second. And there's an option sometimes, so when it comes to choosing between MSAA and SSAA, choose MSAA. It has to do with anti-aliasing, but it is easier to run, so the game will not be as hard to run as it could be. And then we have motion blur. Turn this off. You don't need it, and it will make the computer slower if it is on. If you need to know what this does, well, when anything in the games moves, it blurs the edges of the things that are moving. It can make the game just a bit more realistic, but actually in my opinion it doesn't, so turn it off. And now let's talk about the game. When it comes to each one of these individually, it probably will not make that big of a difference in your gameplay, but if you combine most of these it will make a big difference. Some of these make a bigger difference. For example, the resolution helps a lot when it comes to FPS, but when it comes to other things, it will not make that big of a difference. But if you lower some of the settings, it can make a big difference. So pick what does and what doesn't matter to you when it comes to gameplay. Maybe you want texture, so you don't need to lower the texture quality. Or maybe you want to see more lines, so you need the detail. Or maybe you are someone who likes shadows a lot, so you can keep those. But you get what I mean, you get some, you give some. If you don't have a good GPU, or even if you don't have a GPU at all, then you cannot have them all. And with that said, this was Ray. If you found this video helpful, or if you liked the video, please like. If you didn't, you have the dislike button. But if you want to see more tech-related videos, if you want to get into computer hardware or something like that, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my next video. I make tech-related videos, so if you are into that, make sure to subscribe. This was Ray, and I will catch you in the next one.